This is the heart of the system, the engine that drives it. It is so important that protecting this arrow has become the top priority for both of these guys. That's why after 9/11, when our country was in shock, and President Bush could have suggested any number of appropriate things, to grieve, to pray, to hope. No, he said to shop,
Please note the call to value judgment, judging the merit of what the president does as part of science class.
shop. We have become a nation of consumers. Our primary identity has become that of being consumers, not mothers, teachers, farmers, but consumers.
A list of opinions presented as a fact. While there is a separate discussion how much people should pay attention to consumer goods, that's a separate broad topic other than the production chain that we discuss here.
The primary way that our value is measured and demonstrated is by how much we contribute to this arrow, how much we consume, and do.
Economic value does not depend on how much you consume. There are much more serious considerations there, but that's a discussion for an economics topic.
Do we? We shop and shop and shop, keep the materials flowing, and flow they do. Guess what percentage of total materials flow through this system is still in product or use 6 months after their date of sale in North America? 50%? 20? No, 1%. 1. In other words, 99% of the stuff we harvest, mine, process, transport, 99% of the stuff we run through this system is trashed within 6 months.
This is probably my second favorite lie in this presentation. Please pay attention. She's talking about the stuff. That stuff also includes the thing which we buy the most at the greatest volume, and this is food. With the same logic, you can say that 100% of the stuff the wolf gets goes into the trash, because the wolf in the forest just eats, and you know what happens with the food after a few days of ingestion. So when she says 99% of the stuff, in quotes, that we buy goes to trash, keep in mind that the vast majority of this is food.
Now, how can we run a planet with that level of materials throughput? It wasn't always like this. The average US person now consumes twice as much as they did 50 years ago. Ask your grandma. In her day, stewardship and resourcefulness and thrift were valued. So how did this happen? Well, it didn't just happen.
Interestingly, so material wealth and the ease of well-being suddenly are looked in a negative light.
It was designed. Shortly after World War II, these guys were figuring out how to ramp up the economy. Retailing analyst Victor Lebeau articulated the solution that's become the norm for the whole system. He said, our enormously productive economy demands that we make consumption our way of life, that we convert the buying and use of goods into rituals, that we seek our spiritual satisfaction, our ego satisfaction in consumption.
Imagine the sixth graders being hit by that incredible piece of wisdom. Just one thing to know, especially when it comes to debate, that's a not so common but sometimes employed tactic. Quoting about a particular individual who said something. The fact that that person said that quote doesn't mean that this is actually how the system works. People may have opinion about things and they can voice them out, but voicing one's opinion does not mean that this is how truly the things are.
We need things consumed, burned up, replaced, and discarded at an ever-accelerating rate. President Eisenhower's Council of Economic Advisors chairman said that the American economy's ultimate purpose is to produce more consumer goods.
Remember, just a minute or so ago we were on President Bush. Now we are on President Eisenhower. Again, rapidly switching from topic to topic to confuse the audience, especially if they are young and unprepared.
More consumer goods? Our ultimate purpose? Not provide health care or education or safe transportation?
Attention, value judgment.
Or sustainability or justice? Consumer goods? How did they...
She just mentioned 5 topics over which people could debate for weeks, but let's say even one day for each of them, going in deeper back and forth. Here, she listed them within a few seconds, the whole bunch, letting our brains to imagine what she may mean and fill in the gaps, thus again encouraging us to lie to ourselves.
They get us to jump on board this program so enthusiastically. Well, two of their most effective strategies are planned obsolescence and perceived obsolescence. Planned obsolescence is another word for designed for the dump. It means they actually make stuff to be useless as quickly as possible, so we'll chuck it and buy a new one.
Wow, there is a lot to be said about that term. There is much more than we can discuss here. And how fast materials age and when things break, whether it is on purpose, whether how the useful life of a product depends is much deeper than mentioning here as planned obsolescence because it was designed. If it were so easy to design something to be on purpose crappy, then your competitor will design it to be just a little bit less crappy, and guess what? You'll be stuck with stuff that you can't sell.
It's obvious with things like plastic bags and coffee cups, but now it's even big stuff. Mops, DVDs, cameras, barbecues even, everything. Even computers. Have you noticed that when you buy a computer now, the technology is changing so fast that in just a couple of years, it's actually an impediment to communication? I was curious about this, so I opened up a big desktop computer to see.
She really opened. You open without prior knowledge and suddenly you're supposed to become an expert? Let's find out.
See what was inside. And I found out that the piece that changes each year is just a tiny little piece in the corner. But you can't just change that one piece because each new version is a different shape. So you gotta chuck the whole...
There is so much wrong in this slide that I don't know if it is even worth discussing. Over several years, she implies that only the processor, apparently, that's what I think she was trying to insinuate, is the one thing that you change. So nothing about the motherboard, nothing about the RAM, nothing about the video card. Tell that anyone who has a PC that you're perfectly fine running your latest games on a 10-year-old video card, and let's see what answer you will get. Manipulation again, and I don't know how many 6th graders will catch that. Parents, beware.
whole thing and buy a new one. So I was reading industrial design journals from the 1950s when planned obsolescence was really catching on. These designers are so open about it. They actually discuss how fast can they make stuff break that still leaves the consumer having enough faith in the product to go out and buy another one. It was so intentional. But stuff cannot break fast enough to keep this arrow afloat. So there's also perceived obsolescence. Now, perceived obsolescence convinces us to throw away stuff that is still perfectly useful. How do they do that? Well, they change the way the stuff looks. So if you bought your stuff a couple of years ago, everyone can tell that you haven't contributed to this arrow recently. And since the way we demonstrate our value is contributing to this arrow, it can be embarrassing.
A long chain of conclusions. Presented as fact.
I've had the same fat white computer monitor on my desk for 5 years. My coworker just got a new computer. She has a flat, shiny, sleek monitor. It matches her computer, it matches her phone, even her pen stand. She looks like she's driving in Spaceship Central, and I look like I've got a washing machine on my desk.
Credit to be given, it is cute. But again, what are we trying to tell here and what we are deviating from?
Fashion is another prime example of this. Have you ever wondered why women's shoe heels go from fat one year to skinny the next to fat to skinny? It's not because there's some debate about which heel structure is the most healthy for women's feet. It's because wearing fat heels in a skinny heel year shows everybody that you haven't contributed to that arrow as recently, so you're not as valuable as that person in skinny heels next to you, or more.
So, a grain of truth in a pile of less than truth. Status symbols have existed as long as human civilization has existed. Status symbols exist even among some animal species. Now, there is much more to economy much more to the economy than for us to allow to just pick one tiny facet and present that the whole economy spins around that. It is like the tail wagging the dog.
Likely in some ad, it's to keep us buying new shoes. Advertisements and media in general plays a big role in this. Each of us in the US is targeted with over 3,000 advertisements a day. We see more advertisements in 1 year than people 50 years ago saw in a lifetime. And if you think about it, what's the point of an ad except to make us unhappy with what we have?
Not necessarily. That could be one of the many reasons. The other is just to make us aware of something that may be useful to us. One-sided presentation and presenting again opinions as if they are hard facts.
So 3,000 times a day, we're told our hair is wrong, our skin is wrong, our clothes are wrong, our furniture is wrong, our car is wrong, we are wrong, but it can all be made.
A million different topics quickly glossed over again. Good luck to any listener manage to process them while she's rushing through them.
Made right if we just go shopping. Media also helps by hiding all of this and all of this. So the only part of the materials economy we see is the shopping. The extraction, production, and disposal all happens outside of our field of vision.
Based on whose data?
So in the US, we have more stuff than ever before, but polls show that our national happiness is actually declining. Our national happiness peaked in the 1950s, the same time that this consumption mania exploded. Interesting.
Interesting indeed. But the fact that something happens from the 50s now does not mean that it comes from what she implies. Some people can argue for completely different reasons. Maybe the changes in how people used to look at the family, or many others. Declaring that something is the reason without providing additional support is just nothing more than manipulation.
Coincidence. I think I know why. We have more stuff, but we have less time for the things that really make us happy. Friends, family, leisure time. We're working harder than ever. Some analysts say we have less leisure time than any time since feudal society. And do you know what the two main activities are that we do with the scant leisure time we have? Watch TV and shop. In the US, we spend 3 to 4 times as
What about the hobbies that people have?
many hours shopping as our counterparts in Europe do. So we're in this ridiculous situation where we go to work, maybe 2 jobs even, and we come home and we're exhausted. So we plop down on our new couch and watch TV, and the commercials tell us you suck. So you got to go to the mall to buy something to feel better, and then you got to go to work more to pay for the stuff you just bought. So you come home and you're more tired. So you sit down and you watch more TV, and it tells you to go to.
Continuation of conclusions presented as fact. But here, there is one other technique that comes to mind, and it is kind of more subtle to detect, which happens more rarely in debates but more often in presentations. If you keep going in the same forceful type of energy, and if you go on and on and on and on without giving the audience a chance to process the information, or let alone your opponent to counter you, at some point the audience and even your opponent can simply give up out of exhaustion. That at some point you just no longer feel the incentive to fight and say, okay, you treat that presentation as bad weather, you just put your umbrella and walk away. So your opponent wins the debate. Or here, at some point, we mentally give up on trying to refute every point, especially when they're given in such rapid successions. And at some point, she may be right, or whatever. And even if we don't agree with something, just listening to it, arguments have been made that may have a psychological impact.
Go to the mall again, and we're on this crazy work, watch, spend treadmill, and we could just stop. So in the end, what happens to all the stuff we buy anyway? At this rate of consumption, it can't fit into our houses, even though the average house size has doubled in this country since the 1970s. It all goes out in the garbage. And that brings us to disposal. This is the part of the materials economy we all know the most because we have to haul the junk out to the curb ourselves. Each of us in the United States makes 4.5 pounds of garbage a day. That's twice what we each made 30 years ago. All of this garbage either gets dumped in a landfill, which is just a big hole in the ground, or if you're really unlucky, first it's burned.
So now we are going to discuss the whole idea about municipal waste and handling of disposable products within the remaining 5 minutes of the video, and just gloss it over and hope that nobody will catch us.
Burned in an incinerator and then dumped in the landfill. Either way, they both pollute the air, land, water, and don't forget, change the climate.
Uh-oh.
Incineration is really bad. Remember those toxics back in the production stage? Well, burning the garbage releases the toxics up into the air. Even worse,
So, I don't know how much chemistry Miss Leonard has studied, or how many people have studied chemistry here in the audience. But the thing is, in general, when you burn things, you bring them to carbon dioxide, water, and some other oxides. You can complain that yes, some of those oxides may not be the best thing to be puffed in the air, assuming everything she says is true. But a big bulky organic molecule that was toxic is not going to come out of the chimney as a big bulky organic molecule that it is toxic.
makes new super toxics, like dioxin. Dioxin is the most toxic man-made substance known to science, and incinerators are the #1 source of dioxin. That means that we could stop the #1 source of the most toxic.
Remember what we mentioned in the previous video about tort lawyers? If the things are the way she wants us to believe, there will be lawsuits right now, class action lawsuits left and right, and we'll be bombarded by commercials such as, have you ever lived around a garbage incinerator? You may be entitled to compensation. Call us.
Toxic man-made substance known just by stopping burning the trash. We could stop it today. Now, some companies don't want to deal with building landfills and incinerators here, so they just export the disposal too. What about recycling? Does recycling help? Yes, recycling helps. Recycling reduces the garbage at this end, and it reduces the pressure to mine and harvest new stuff at this end. Yes, yes, yes.
I'm surprised she didn't say exploit.
We should all recycle, but recycling is not enough. Recycling will never be enough for a couple reasons. First, the waste coming out of our houses is just the tip of the iceberg. For every 1 garbage can of waste you put out on the curb, 70 garbage cans of waste were made upstream.
I would appreciate getting a reference where this information comes from.
Just to make the junk in that 1 garbage can you put out on the curb. So even if we could recycle 100% of the waste coming out of our households, it doesn't get to the core of the problems. Also, much of the garbage can't be recycled, either because it contains too many toxics or it's designed not to be recyclable in the first place. Like those juice packs, where they have layers of metal and paper and plastic all smushed together. You can never separate those for true recycling.
Which brings another interesting point. When we are talking about an enormous plurality of different products, an enormous array of various circumstances, how the presenter can pick just 1 or 2 carefully chosen examples that support the point, which may or may not have much to do with the totality of the circumstances. Here we do not know because we do not have this information, but be on the lookout for this manipulative technique.
So you see, it is a system in crisis. All along the way, we're bumping up against limits. From changing climate to declining happiness,
We haven't yet heard the evidence in this presentation how from Ice Age till today the human activity is predominantly responsible for changing the climate.
It's just not working. But the good thing about such an all-pervasive problem is there are so many points of intervention. There are people working here on saving forests, here on clean production, labor rights, fair trade, conscious consuming.
Social policies, labor rights, how does this has to do with the environment? Whether you agree or not, keep in mind, this is the 6th grade classroom, science, and we are talking about politics and policies.
Blocking landfills and incinerators, and very importantly, taking back our government.
Taking back the government, so vote for us, and all of a sudden these problems will disappear. How did I didn't know that? Oh my God, I have wasted so much time trying to make this present. Just vote for them, and the things will be back to where they should be. Let's find out.
That it really is by the people, for the people.
Remember that phrase from the beginning? She said it once earlier. Now she's the script. She's doing it again. A phrase that commonly appears in certain types of government that lean in a certain way.
All of this work is critically important, but things really start moving when we see the connections, when we see the big picture. When people all along this system get united, we can reclaim and transform this whole linear system.
Vote for us. Oh my God. So, here usually towards the end of these presentations, people start saying, oh, please like, subscribe, and obey, and whatever. You may do that. There will be more videos. But something more important. People should know what their kids are seeing in the classroom. And this is science, what is presented as science to our children, mostly Canada and America. If you know anyone who has a kid who is at the age of 12, 13, and they are in a public school, they should be aware of the story of stuff. They should be aware of what their kids are seeing and how information is presented, regardless of whether you agree or disagree with the various propositions in the presentation. You may agree with the policy. That's separate than the issue of how such information is brought to the children and how they are influenced to think and in the future vote in a certain way.
Into something new, a system that doesn't waste resources.
And please note another thing. We had solid black hours all the way in the presentation. People usually represent dark hours as green future, something bad is happening, the somber music. For the first time we see the green coming almost like the cavalry coming here to our rescue. Vote for us. Let's retake the government. I wonder from whom. And all that black stuff will turn into green because we know much better.
Resources or people. You see, what we really need to chuck is that old school throwaway mindset. There's a new school of thinking about this stuff, and it's based on sustainability and equity. Things
3,
like green chemistry, zero
4,
waste, closed
5,
loop production, renewable
6,
energy, local
7.
living economies. It's already started.
So 7 subjects that could be debated back and forth again, put up in several seconds total. Good luck figuring it out and refuting it in your mind as she goes on.
Some say it's unrealistic, too idealistic that it can't happen. I say the ones who are unrealistic are those who think that we can continue with the old way. They're dreaming.
They're dreaming. So, we haven't seen much of shaming, insulting, and intimidating language and language imparting guilt. Now, although we saw that in the beginning, never mind. But here, now, if you disagree with me, something is wrong with you. This is the type of manipulation. If you see in a debate, you should immediately point out and counter.
Remember, that old way didn't just happen. It wasn't like gravity that we just have to live with. People created it, and we're people too. So let's create something new. There's a lot of information on this website about groups doing incredible work. Click around, get involved.
So, call to action. So, this was the story of stuff. Let parents know what children are seeing in the classroom and make sure that kids get at least a bound presentation. If we cannot hope for a political presentation, which I think should be the case in science 6th grade, if we cannot have a political presentation, at least there should be some sort of balance, such as letting them know what these presenters are doing wrong. Thank you, and we'll see you in the next video.